Welcome back to today's personal finance show here on Dublin City FM with me, Paul Merriman from askpaul.ie, and my guest in studio, which is Andrew Rhatigan, Director of Rhatigan Real Estate based in Foxrock, County Dublin.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Thanks very much for making the effort to get into the studio. At the top of the show, I did say that we're going to discuss the property market and hence the reason why you're here. Obviously, you're a founder, director of a real estate company. You're going to have expert knowledge in the marketplace. I think one of the biggest questions, let's just dive into this. What are your thoughts on the property market, especially for first-time buyers? That's probably the biggest question I get on the askpaul.ie Instagram page on a weekly basis, followed up with, do I think the property market's going to crash? Personally, no. What's your thoughts?
I'd agree. The supply just isn't there and the demand just keeps on growing day on day, week on week, and the numbers aren't just adding up online. So I think there's going to be demand to beat demand going forward. Yeah,
I definitely agree. I think, to be fair, I think the figures that have been quoted by the government over the last number of years, not only haven't they haven't reached the targets, I think the target was too low anyway, in around 30,000 houses. I think we need way more. I always say to people that come in, especially when they're coming in for maybe a consultation for a mortgage and they're thinking about getting on the property ladder, you got to, I think, in between 250,000, well, you can't really buy much in Dublin for that, but in between, say, 250, 300,000 and maybe 5 to 600,000, it's so jammed with demand and there's not that much supply. Anything above that, 800,000, a million above, since interest rates have gone up, to be fair, you're probably getting a little bit less competition, a little bit less demand, I would think. Would you see that in your sector, your kind of market, when you're talking to people?
It's a different type of market. Each area has its own pitfalls and its own benefits, for want of a better word. But the reality of it is each category will have a different personality type. So first time buyer is like someone who wants to get their first loan. They're excited, they want to get out there. They have the daily lifestyle stuff they're trying to deal with, and they're also dealing with 100,000 other people like them. With the higher end, it's just a different type of person. They usually have a different perspective on property. They may have bought already before. But yeah, I mean, it's a busy market out there and it's trying to be well equipped to start off doing the best you can with what you've got.
Right, okay, very good. I do think that the property market for those first time buyers, you've hit the nail on the head. It's, I find dealing with first time buyers for mortgage application, like I said, they are so enthusiastic and they're trying to buy for the first time. Their hopes, their aspirations, their dreams, they're probably going to have kids in this house, or might get married from the house, and it's all filled with emotion and there's not much, I'm not going to say logic, is probably a bit harsh, but yeah, you can see that personality trait coming through.
Absolutely. And I think when people when they set out on their journey, usually they're grateful that someone thought them worthy, in inverted commas, of a mortgage or a loan. But when you then look back on it, you realise that it's a product. So part of the search for people is to take that pragmatic approach, acknowledge the emotions. So your stage of life, it's super important to note where you are versus what you want to achieve. But then when you ground yourself in that clarity, sometimes you actually do away with 3 to 6 weeks, if not longer, of time wasted because of excitement that all it needed was a coffee and a conversation.
Yeah.
People skip that bit.
Yeah, you're dead right. And I think as well, I think one of the questions that came in, which we'll discuss later on the show, one of the questions was the process of going for a mortgage before buying a property, where I find a lot of people come to us for a mortgage and they're kind of going, I've bid in a house. You haven't got a mortgage yet. Number one, the agent shouldn't accept it probably without seeing the mortgage approval. But they're looking at houses on daft, they're going viewing them, they're getting involved in bidding processes, and they're so invested emotionally without having the financial box ticked. So for anyone listening that's in the first time buyer sector, you really should be getting mortgage approval before jumping ahead and even viewing properties on daft, for argument's sake, because I think, to be fair, you're probably only wrecking your own head because you can't really do anything without the mortgage approval.
It's a balance of the two, and I think you're absolutely right. I think a big part of what actually compounds the issues for people is people get excited and jump into action. But I usually use fitness as an example. So if you set out and you said to me, I want to run a marathon, I'm not going to say give it a go tomorrow. I'm going to say walk around the block, see how you feel. Run around the block, see how you feel. And you build in those metrics. People almost overlook the value of a financial advisor or a broker, where you can go to them and say, warts and all, this is my lifestyle, these are my aspirations, and this is my finances. These are my finances on the ground. What do I need to do? And a really good broker will say to you, listen, you're already 20% of the way there. Acknowledge it, and here's your homework for the next 3 to 6 months. Or he might say, you're not at the races. But if you're not prepared and you jump straight into dealing with property, you're actually putting other people off. They're losing faith in agents, they're losing faith in the property market, and they've already done the work that you need to do. But it's like a staircase. just because you're not on step 5 doesn't mean you need to skip there straight away. Step 1, 2, 3 and 4 will actually move faster if you acknowledge where you're at and take the necessary steps.
Very good. And I suppose, Andrew, in fairness, from a lot of tips there for first-time buyers, what tips have you got for people that are thinking of moving property? Because I find in particular that it's a little bit more, it can be more stressful because they might have children and they're also trying to sell a property, which is painful, and buy a property at the same time. And that balancing act can be really stressful. Any major tips here before we get into because you have a really unique offer here that might help people as you're offering it as a service. But before we get into your service, what tips would you have for them?
I think the preparation is the real key, and it's the real the joke of Mike Tyson has it. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah. But sometimes they skip talking about the eventualities. So I always say to people, when you have a house, you have to ground yourself in gratitude, because be under no illusions that owning a home is an amazing achievement, and people automatically look for the next big thing because we live in a society where the next iPhone comes out and you forget you already had an iPhone. So when you have a house, you have to look at your lifestyle now and why you're moving. And it's important to challenge why you're moving, so you're very clear on what it is you want to get, but also then compare it to what's on the market. When you set out selling your home, people almost think that they shouldn't tell their agent certain things for fear that it's going to change the opinion, or that he'll have the upper hand or she'll have the upper hand.
Yeah.
If you look at them like a confidant and you lay out what it is you're planning to do, they can guide you as up-to-date reality in terms of like on the ground. They may have someone that called them yesterday saying they want to buy in this particular location, and they're a great communicator, they're not in a rush to move, and that means that your process then means it's not as stressful. But if you don't tell them what you're hoping to achieve, they'll just go through the motions of advising you to get photos done, go on the market and see what happens.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is that preparation, that conversation about what you think you want versus what is actually going to happen on the ground. And also, if you're not, sometimes you need a reality check that the property you want doesn't exist right now.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for your sale? And it's important for people when they're selling to be empowered that your agent will always want to support you, but no one has a gun to your head in terms of forcing you to sell. And someone guiding you on where your journey is at each particular stage is very important. So if you get offers too soon or very quickly and you need to take stock, be honest and open, take stock and focus on what it is you need for the next steps. But oftentimes people don't do that preparation.
Yeah. I always say to people as well, again, back to that kind of financial planning piece, to make sure that you have the financial plan or the financial planner in place to talk about the finances. I think a lot of people, if you have a property already, like I said, you are in a really good situation, you will most likely have equity in that property. The mortgage will be well below, obviously, the value, hopefully for most people. That equity will stand to you when you're trying to buy the next property. But sometimes where I find advice goes for people is that, let's say they bought a property 5-6 years ago, they had 2 incomes coming in and now they're in good shape. If somebody has now stopped working or reducing their hours, they mightn't qualify for even the mortgage they have today, because they might have less income because someone's got on a 3-day week, or someone's got job sharing, or somebody stopped work altogether. So it's really to make sure that even in your head you think you can afford a mortgage or the new mortgage repayments, before going down trying to buy property or looking at properties to trade up into, is to have that financial planning conversation. This is where we are, this is where we're trying to get to, what do we need to do to get there? The other thing that really catches people out here for second time buyers or people trading up is the ability to repay a mortgage. Let's say you have a €450,000 mortgage today and you're thinking of taking a $600,000 loan out. You probably have a shorter period of time as well for the term of the mortgage because you're older when you got your first mortgage. So it's trying to make sure that you've allowed for the affordability to repay. So if your current mortgage is $1,800 a month and the new one is €2,300 a month, for argument's sake, you need to show that extra €500 is either in savings or somewhere. And if you can't show that to the bank and you're spending your money on a monthly basis, you won't get the mortgage approval. And it takes 6 months to prepare those accounts. And again, the usual things, you're going for new applications, so you could have paid a mortgage perfectly for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But if you're still in overdrafts, you're skipping overdrafts, skipping direct debits, and you haven't got really good manager accounts, you're kind of swimming against the tide. So again, big one, failing to prepare. You want to make sure that you have this prepared, especially from a financial planning point of view. Andrew, we mentioned your service quickly there. Can you bring people through what you do for customers? Because you're not your typical real estate agent in the Irish marketplace. And in fairness, when you told me what you did do when we met, I was thinking, this chap should be on Selling Sunset, because it sounds like it's a very American product, but it's a real, probably no-brainer for some people in the marketplace. So why don't you take listeners through what you do?
No problem. Well, first and foremost, I'm a licensed property agent in Ireland, which is required. So it's important that anyone who's thinking of selling always go with someone who's licensed, because they adhere to certain standards, and I apply the same to the buying side of the process. So essentially, I set out, like a lot of people at the beginning of COVID, with that kind of viewpoint of what impact I want to make on the people I work with and also my family. And when I started my business, I really just led with the things that drive me, which is connections, networking, and helping people. It wasn't transactional.
Okay.
And I began to kind of undo that whole idea of an estate agent in a suit and tie with a clipboard, telling you all these things they think you want to hear. And I'm not saying agents do that, but we do live in a market where someone who tells the truth isn't viewed like a dentist or a mechanic. They're viewed as, maybe less optimistic about your property. So I wanted to take on that advisory piece. And I found that people began to come to me and ask for an opportunity to unjumble all the things that were their life. So what people do is they come to me, they have a big bag of puzzles, like from a jigsaw. They lay it out on the table and they say, what am I supposed to do with this? And a big part of what I do is I cut straight to the kindness part of my process, but also cut through any of the stuff that someone may take 6 months in therapy to get out of the way.
Right, okay.
And I notice the things that people don't say to me. So if I notice there's tension in a couple, I'm going to take the first half an hour, 40 minutes, and I'm just going to tackle it. But I'm tackling it from a place of kindness. I'm saying, you are looking to buy a huge asset. You both have to be on the same page. If there's underlying resentment here, if there's a family issue, if there's a life stage that you're not telling me about, that could be a good life stage. You've won the lotto. It could be a bad life stage. You're selling your family home because someone passed away. Everything has an attachment to it.
Yeah.
And what I did is I applied the human element to the process. So then what I do is I take all of that, I get people clear on what it is they think they want, and then we set about finding it for them. So we do searching, assessment, property overviews, and we save people on average about 80 hours a month on their search.
Well,
because people do it without purpose, they do it for no reason, and the vast majority of the time they do it to be busy as opposed to being tactical.
Well, can your clients still scroll through daft.ie? Because now a lot of people love doing that. Look at properties, yeah.
Absolutely.
And do they wreck your head when they do that? And they can send you another property. So let's take myself and my wife Sarah, for argument's sake. Say we're moving from our house. I have a dream to live in a certain part of Dublin, beside a certain school. We want this type of lifestyle. The thing is that we sit down with you, we give you what we want. We forget about it. You go off, do all the research, come back saying, here's 3 or 4 options, and I've arranged these 3 or 4 viewings, which saves us a lot of time, a lot of energy. That's basically the service.
Yeah. And
with the human touch on top of it as well.
Yeah. And I think
so if Sarah wants to move beside her mum and I don't want to live beside her mum, you're going to sort that out for me as well.
If you hear that, Sarah, there's going to be turmoil when you get home. So I think the best way to look at it is I offer each person a platform. So it's like an example I use with people is if you teach a loved one to drive, even though you care, you want to drive value for that loved one, you sit in the car and your hands are clenched because you have an attachment, you have preconceptions, and you worry about that person. What I do is I call it like I see it when I meet people. I don't judge. I don't get taken in with the kind of things you have. So flashy cars, titles, your position in life. I look at 2 people that are trying to work through something together. And oftentimes I offer them a platform, which is I let one partner talk about the things they want without fear of judgment, and I be quick enough to put manners on the person who's about to tell them what they think the other person is thinking. But the idea is when you give people a platform, it means they get it off their chest.
Very good.
Then we can acknowledge it and you set about looking for property.
Very good. And do you find for clients that are coming to you, I think I mentioned this when I went onto Instagram to say you're going to join me in studio today to get people to ask questions, which we'll get to later on the show. But I did mention that you've obviously worked with some sports stars, kind of our celebs that don't want to be involved in going to view the house for the first time because they feel it's going to drive up the price once people see who they are and have a kind of guesstimation of their net worth. So that's something else you would provide in that situation. Is there anything that people like your clients particularly look for when buying a property that's repetitive? Like, is it schools? Is it the area? Is it the address? Is it the size of the house? Is it the car spaces? Or is there any one thing that's coming through that you've noticed that people want other than the price?
Funny enough, I have 2 things. When I work with people, I put together a checklist, and I always tell people, especially partners, to do it separately because I want them to firstly lead with having a bit of fun with it. And then what I'd say to people is, right, you're saying you want off-street parking for 3 cars because he might have aspirations for a classic car, something like that, whatever it may be. And then she may want an additional space so she can entertain family or friends. What I then do is I distill it into the nice to haves versus the have to haves.
Right.
If you don't get clear on your have to haves from day one, it muddies the water later on.
Very good.
I try and cut through that on day one.
Right, very good. Excellent. How do people contact you? We're going to stay around for questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
But the website is?
orre.ie.
Okay, so orre.ie. And also, you do have a really good free course for people, which is a buyer's course. So people that are thinking about buying property. How do people sign up to it, and where do they find it? On orre.ie as well?
No, I actually have it on my LinkedIn page because that's the easiest port of call for everyone.
Excellent.
We do a weekly newsletter as well on a Saturday.
Brilliant.
And gifts galore, and there's a bit of humour thrown in there as well, so there's nothing stuffy about it.
Excellent. So everyone just has to check you out as Andrew Rhatigan on LinkedIn to get that information too.
Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, into this week's question. So Andrew, loads of really good questions in. Again, thanks for sticking around. First one is, do I need mortgage approval to bid on a house? And that's from Jane. I'll take this one. Yeah, Jane, you do. There's no point in going to bid on a property without having the mortgage approval. To be fair, you're actually annoying yourself. I'd always say to people, don't even go on daft or you look at houses until you have mortgage approval, because you don't know what you're looking for. Andrew, what's your thoughts? I mean, this must be a nightmare in your sector when people show up and start bidding on stuff without mortgage approval, is it?
Totally agree. Their enthusiasm is understandable, but it's not going to help anyone, and it actually just compounds the process for people and the frustration. So wait until you're ready, and when you're ready, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, you know, it's so emotional as well. I mentioned this earlier on the show. It's so emotional going to buy a property. You have a couple sitting down. Will we buy? We move in? Yeah, what will we get? We think we'd get X amount. They might even go into a mortgage calculator online and say, great, we'll get 300 grand. We have 50, that's 400. And they start looking at 400,000 houses, €400,000 worth of houses, where they mightn't even get that from a mortgage approval point of view. You know, so yeah, it is really important, guys, you get mortgage approval first. Okay, next question in for Ben. How do I trust the estate agent when they say another bid has come in? I feel I'm being lied to. I'm with Ben on this one. I've been this hero. I'm not going to lie. There's nothing worse than getting that phone call back saying, yeah, there's another 10 grand on or 20 grand, whatever the bidding is. And you just wonder, is there somebody in the background, or am I just getting kind of roped in here? What is there? Is there kind of any legal or kind of processes in play, or from even like a society for real estate agents where there's ethics, or what way does this work? So if I'm bidding on a house tomorrow and that keeps happening, what can I do?
So first things first, you want to make sure that the person who's selling the property is licensed to do so.
Okay.
And there's quite stringent measures in place where you'll have to do CPD and have a license in
So
place.
it's code of ethics, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. But no legal kind of code. Like in my industry, we're heavily regulated by the central bank.
Well, you have to have a license to sell property in Ireland, and
Right.
that's key first and foremost. Now, the only outlier to that is that someone can sell their own property, but you can't sell it for someone else. And what's very important, I always say to anybody, is two things that people don't need to not underestimate is your gut or your intuition. If you're not getting a good feeling about a property, it's very important to take stock as to why. Because sometimes your internal mechanism is telling you there's something going on here, whether it's the agent or not. It could be something to do with the property, the area, or why you're approaching this house. So don't underestimate your gut. But secondly, it's always good practice. Whatever the conversation you've had with any agent, always follow it up with, and a good agent is absolutely used to this. Can you just send me an email to summarise what we chatted about? So let's say you contact me.
That's really good advice, actually.
Yeah, well, let's say you come to me and you say there's an extra bid of €10,000. There's two bidders in play and one of them's just made their first bid, for argument's sake. I say, that's amazing. I'm in the middle of my work day. Could you send me an email to summarise that and the most recent bid? And two things. It makes the agent sit down and write it down so they have an account of the bids, but it also gives you an opportunity to reflect on something that's digitally written down, saying where it's at.
And are the agents meant to keep a log? So if I go to bid in a house, do I have to, can I ring the agent and put a bid in, or does the agent have to ask me for it by email? So like, is there anything that we can log and go back over if you think that you've been in doubt, or no?
I always say to people, firstly, if you make a bid over the phone, I would always follow up with an email.
No, just saying, is there actually, sorry, I don't know, is there actually something in place? Like, does a estate agent have to have a log of all the bids and who bid at a certain time? No, there's
yes.
No. You do, yeah.
They do.
Okay,
yeah.
So if you were really doubtful, you could go back and challenge that and show me the bids.
Absolutely. So as an example, I was audited last year, and that's part and parcel of what we do.
Is it?
Every 2 to 5 years you get audited, and that's where they go through a file of the property. So you have to have all the valid signatures of the people selling it, and you have to have a log of all bids.
Okay, so there's really big oversight here then from... Yeah, okay, excellent. And that's from who? That's from where you get your licence. What's that called?
So you've got the PRSA, which is the Property Regulatory Services Authority.
And is that who audits you?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, great.
Yeah. And it's quite a journey, because you always do the right things, but it's like when you see a Garda car pulling you in for a checkpoint, you hope you've done everything the right way, but it encourages people to keep it above board.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, there you go. So if you do feel you're being lied to, you can challenge, you can go back to the agent and look for those type of logs as well. Okay, next question in, any advice on buying via an auction? I might go first. Buying via an auction is quite complex, especially from a mortgage point of view, because I've seen them bought before, and then they won't pass the surveys, or there's some issue with title, and it can get very, very, very messy. And you've also signed, I think from a legal point of view, once you sign at the auction that you're buying, you have to complete, or you're going to be sued, you're going to lose your deposit. So I would probably stay away, unless it was, I'd definitely stay away from kind of more hassle properties, or properties that have a bad background. Or I'd maybe stay away from properties that aren't coming from a really reputable agency, to be fair, from an auction point of view, me personally. What do you think?
I would agree. I think the reality for auctions is they suit investors and those who are seasoned in property. So it's much like somebody's in the car business. They're not going to agonise over buying a car off someone. They'll take it as it comes. If you're not equipped to deal with it, you're better off saying no, because a good deal on paper isn't always a good deal in reality. Yeah. And in Ireland, legals, title, all that kind of stuff, it can be overlooked at the beginning, but that could be the bane of your life going forward. Yeah, it can
get very messy. I think auctions as well for property, probably not today's world because of prices and where they've gone the last 10 years in particular, but it's not the worst thing to do from a cash buyer point of view. And like I said, if you're seasoned in property investing, you know what you're getting into, and any issues you can overcome them, but you don't have the loan piece. And then when you're getting a mortgage, it becomes extremely messy. Any chance of property prices dropping? That's the next question in. We kind of covered this already at the top of this piece. To be fair, I don't think property prices in Dublin, especially for first time buyers, that 250 to maybe 500,000-600,000, maybe even slightly more, is going anywhere. I think it's going to probably level off a little bit, maybe 2-3% growth per annum. I can't see the crash. I think we're really, I suppose, obsessed or wounded from the financial crash of 2007 and 2008. I think once things are going up, or anything kind of wobbles economy wise, we automatically think this crash is going to come and wipe us all out. But I think with the supply and demand issue, that's not going to be the case. That's my...
I think we're decades behind in terms of supply. I think there's a real disconnect between what's they think there was required and what's actually required on the ground. Yeah. And like you said, those people that are buying, firstly, they're not Warren Buffett. They can't wait a decade to start living their lives. Yeah. So even I say to people, if you, inverted commas, overpaid for a property today, it's like Warren Buffett says, you don't lose unless you sell. Yes. But the reality for everyone day to day is you're going to cut your cloth, you have a property that's yours, you enhance its value and you enjoy it. But also in Ireland, we have a very funny system, and it's not going to change anytime soon.
And also, I think people have to realise, if you're renting today, big thing here for first-time buyers that are concerned or maybe sitting on the fence. If you're renting today and you're paying rent in between maybe €2,500, which isn't that weird to be doing in Dublin today, in today's marketplace, and you're buying something for maybe under 450, 500,000, you have a decent deposit, you're probably still going to be paying similar, if not less, in rent. If you wait, even if the property market was to come down by 10%, the reason that would happen is massive inflation, massive unemployment, and what will happen then is that the mortgage interest rate will be much higher to try and curb inflation. So you'll probably end up paying more in your mortgage rate in a couple of years' time, which will wipe out the cost of interest, will wipe out the saving on the property. So it's not as simple as the property price. You have to take in the cost of borrowing into consideration and the term you have to borrow over. So yeah, I wouldn't be sitting on the fence, to be fair, when it comes to it. Okay, next question. This is definitely one for you. Thoughts on buying out a leasehold on a property to make it a freehold. Can we just give listeners an idea of the leasehold versus the freehold, if you don't mind, first of all, before we answer this question?
Yeah, so essentially a leasehold is a kind of a long leasehold or a long agreement that the property is held within a certain title for a period of time. Now, you would have some leases. The famous one is the Diageo lease, that's 999 years.
Guinness lease on the keys.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. But you'll often find that the best port of call is a solicitor when it comes to your choices. So if you have a choice to buy out the leasehold, it's relevant to the property and the location in Dublin. But also, a solicitor will also advise you that if the leasehold is due to run out and you do have a mortgage, say if it's within the next 10 or 15 years of the life cycle of the mortgage, they will then request that the leasehold be renewed. So it depends on the property.
And it's very difficult to get a mortgage if there's less than 70 years as well. It usually has to be more than 70 years, so you really need to check that if it does come up as an issue, if you think you're going to have an issue with it. And
much like preparation, ask solicitors, because they do it day in, day out, and it's very easy for them to come back to you and tell you yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, in fairness, this is a real legal question, to be fair. So yeah, you'd probably be referring back towards your solicitor on these type of cases. Okay, good question. And next one is, I bought a property abroad. Does it exclude me from my first time buyers if or when I return to Ireland? That's in from Ben. Ben, really good question. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people, actually. So you will be excluded from the Help to Buy scheme, the Revenues Help to Buy. So the Revenues Help to Buy will give you up to €30,000 if you're buying a new build under a value of €500,000. That's the Help to Buy. You'll be excluded from that. That specifically states if you've ever bought a property before, be it in Ireland or abroad, you're going to be excluded. However, banks will consider you a first-time buyer because you're a first-time buyer here in the Irish property market. So that's the difference. But yeah, you won't be getting that Help to Buy if you're thinking about getting the Help to Buy. Very straightforward. Hey Paul, bought a house. EBS did a property survey of the house. Should we get an independent survey too? And that's in from Andrew. And Andrew, I'm going to pass that one to you.
Firstly, that Andrew is not me. Secondly, I always say for peace of mind, it's good to have someone independent. And that's nothing against any particular brokers or lenders who recommend or carry out a survey, but it provides clarity where it's a completely independent party who can give you their thoughts. And communication when it comes to surveys is key as well, because you need context.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I'm glad you said that, because I would have said no. I would have went, no, EBS have done their survey. If there's anything going to show up in the survey, they're not going to let you buy the house. But you're kind of saying there could be things that the EBS don't care about that your independent surveyor would tell you. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, so if you're a lender, you'll have certain practicalities that you're going to look for in terms of the value of the asset.
It's more structural, really, isn't it? Yeah.
And what you really need is you need someone who look over the property and give you context on it. So if you're looking at an older property, if I simply say there's damp in the corner, you're going to assume the worst if you're the worrying type. If I say there's damp in the corner because it's an old house, it's all part of it and here's how to fix it, you have context. Whereas if some lender's looking at it and saying, well, we have 10 boxes and 9 of them are ticked, that matters to us. But they may not, I'm not saying they don't, but they may not communicate the everyday nitty-gritty to the on-the-ground person so they can prepare for works that need to be done.
So the answer for Andrew in this case is yes, still get your independent survey yourself. And then when you're picking a surveyor, you want somebody that can communicate really with you as well. So not just a box-ticking survey. So someone's not just going to give you a report, box-ticking, saying there you go. They're going to bring you through the survey and say here's the things you need to be worried about, or there's nothing to be worried about. Here's something that might cost you an extra couple of grand to fix, but it's easily done. So that would
give them a to-do list. I always say to anyone, tell people what it is you like. So instead of just saying, I want you to look at a house, say to someone, I want you to look at the house. I don't understand X, Y, Z, and I want to you talk to me like I'm a Labrador. Give me the 5 things I should be worried about. Because if people are jumping to, going to Harvey Norman and buying TVs, whereas they need to look at the foundations, get someone to give you context. Allocate 5 grand to fix this house, as opposed to spending money on furnishings that isn't important right now.
Brilliant advice. Okay, I love that advice. Okay, paying the mother mortgage off. Okay, paying their mother's mortgage off, I presume, of €130,000. She's signing over the property. How does this work? Okay, so you need to be very, very careful here, actually, because if you're basically gifting your mother €130,000, she's going to have a capital acquisition tax issue there straight away. So what I would be doing in this case is buying the property. So let's say the property, you can receive up to a gift from your parents or your mum in this case of $335,000 over your lifetime. So if this house happened to be worth €460,000, I would be buying the house, given the €130,000. I'm still within the $335,000. Your mum has no tax issues, and you get the house, and you've wiped out your $330,000 threshold. So it needs to be done that way. You can't just give your mum the $130,000 because you will definitely have a tax liability, and then if she gives you the property, there's going to be another tax liability if it's worth more than $335,000. So anyone thinking of doing this or trying to get property from parents or passing it down, you really need, number one, the financial planning piece with a tax piece on top of it. And really important, this is structured the correct way, because The outcome is still the same. What the question is, the property is being transferred to the son or daughter in this case. There's no name on this one. So the transfer still ends up with the son and daughter, but how you got there can be a massive difference from a tax point of view. So keep that in mind. Okay, thinking of buying a house back home due to Dublin prices, do I need to have land before going for the mortgage or mortgage before buying the land? Okay, this is somebody obviously from the country who's getting sick and tired of Dublin house prices. And I don't blame you. Okay, so first of all, you need to have the land, and the land needs to be in your name before going for the mortgage. You will not get a loan offer. They won't take the application off you unless you do have the planning permission and it's in your name. It needs to be in your name. So what you could do in this case, just for kind of give as much advice as I can here quickly, what you could do in this case, let's say you find a piece of land, an acre somewhere, you want to buy it. You sign contracts subject to planning being granted and making sure the planning is in your name. So let's say you're buying it off a farmer, they take a 5,000 maybe deposit off you, you sign a contract that once the planning is received and is transferred into your name, that's when you buy the actual land, and that's the contract. You go back to the bank, you have your land, it's in your name, and you go for the mortgage. Good news is at that stage, let's say the land was €50,000 and you're looking for a build cost of 500k or a total value of 500k after the build cost, that's your deposit. So your 50k you've invested in that land as your deposit. Another thing to work out for the sidebar here, the bank will probably want to see a 10% contingency in cash, so you need another 50k in the background just in case the project overruns so you can actually complete your house. So not a simple yes or no question, a lot of advice in there. But yeah, again, buying land, especially if you're going to build, you really need a financial plan and a little bit of legal in the background as well before you do it. Actually, Andrew, while you're here, just to ask for this listener and any other listeners, any tips on buying land?
I think it's important to acknowledge the localised planning. So when you're in certain parts of Ireland, it can be a lot easier to either apply or assess applying for planning than in other locations. So there's some areas of Wicklow where you might have someone that's lived there for 40 years, but because they weren't born there, it may not be as easy as someone who's second or third generation.
What?
Yeah, so really? I think it's important to really assess. And this, I think, like a lot of things, people will ask questions about other things. Do you like this jumper? Do you like this jacket? And they'll often skip to the exciting part of property. But sometimes paying someone for their time to tell you no could save you 100 grand in the long run in terms of time and energy spent.
This is like the Gaeltacht, isn't that right? Over in the Gaeltacht in the west of Orange, you need to have basically being born there, I think, to get planning. I've heard that. Maybe that's a rumour, but it's something similar you're saying, is it? It's
similar. Now, I don't know exactly how it works. I always say to people that every local area has its own nuances. So Ireland is a real patchwork quilt of planning.
Just to say, not having a go at Wicklow, but I can understand the Gaeltacht having a rule. But Wicklow, come on, get a grip. Sorry guys, sorry for those of Wicklow. Okay, last question. We have time for one more quick question. Thinking of moving to a bigger house, but not sure how to go about the mortgage and if I need savings, or will the bank take the surplus from the house? Do we need a bridging loan? All very confusing. There's a lot in that, so let's break it down. So first of all, if you're going up to buy for a bigger house, we mentioned this earlier in the show as well, Andrew. If you are buying a bigger property or trading up, let's say, you definitely need the financial plan first to make sure, number one, you can qualify for the mortgage and all your accounts are in order to make sure you can get the mortgage approval for the difference between the current house and the new house. So that's my take from a financial planning point of view. You don't need a bridging loan. You shouldn't need a bridging loan unless you can sell your house in time and you're cut for the hop for actually closing on the second contract. You may need a bridging loan in that case, but you wouldn't typically be preparing for a bridging loan before moving or before even looking at this. Andrew, any advice here? I know we went through this briefly earlier on the show. Any advice for trading up quickly?
I think very simply, not to steal Simon Sinek's way, but you have to look at why you're doing it. And I think a part of this, when you're making a move at this stage, it's going to be more strategic rather than knee-jerk. And part of that strategy has to be, is the juice worth the squeeze? So when you're planning on moving, there are going to be things at play. If you see your ideal property today that you want, it's going to allow you to upgrade, and you haven't even brought your own property to the market, you're not at the races. You need to prepare and understand the timelines involved.
I'm going to say get your own house on the market first before you even look at bidding anywhere else, because again, an agent shouldn't really be taking the bid if your house hasn't been sold yet, should they? No.
Now, the reality is agents thrive on taking on new business as well, so you want to be careful to make sure that your own timeline's in line with what you want.
And I've seen people do this. Go look at a property that's for sale and say to the agent, can you sell my house? And the agent kind of wants to straddle the boat and bring the seller of the new house on the journey to say we're going to sell this person's house. Yeah, you're right. So they're kind of not going to say put themselves in a compromising situation, but to me they shouldn't be taking any bids if the other house isn't at least on the market. If not sale agreed. Like if I was selling my house today, I would hate to think that my agent is even entertaining someone that hasn't gone sale agreed in their house, because that chain is so easily broken, and then it's a nightmare for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, also I think the legal system in Ireland, nothing is binding for such a long period of time that people don't know what to do. So if you're in the likes of Australia, you can have a deal signed within kind of 30 to 45 minutes and it's binding. So people have, they have that peace of mind. But what I say to people is if they're thinking of selling, they have to imagine that everything that's on the market right now is not meant for them. They have to prepare their own house. And let's say, for example, your campaign moves faster than you anticipate. You can then pump the brakes and say, you know what, we're not ready just yet. If it goes slower, you've given yourself the buffer.
Excellent.
But in reality, you want to make sure that you organise what it is you want to do. But again, it's much like bidding without your approval in place. There's no point in running around bidding on things for the sake of it, because you're going to frustrate the process.
Okay, we're going to leave it there on that one. Andrew, thanks a million for coming into the studio today to have a chat with me. I've really enjoyed that chat. Massive value for listeners there this morning. Guys, that's it for this week. Thanks as always for tuning in. Massive thank you again for Andrew Rhatigan for joining me in studio. You can get to Andrew on www.rre.ie or check him out on LinkedIn, and make sure you sign up to the weekly newsletter he has. And also don't forget about the free property buying course that he mentioned, which again you can sign up through LinkedIn.